Nice to see a number of young participants, actually quite a few, Anjali Tai, this time, and for this talk. And I'll be the host. I'll just quickly introduce, the speaker. And it is a privilege to sort of introduce our speaker for the afternoon, Father Lancy Prabhu. This talk is obviously hosted and brought together by the Mumbai Center. And just to give you a background about the Mumbai Center, it's got a very interesting background. So J. Krishnamurti used to hold regular talks in Mumbai in the JJ School of Arts. And these were anchored by the Mumbai Center. And of course, now what the center does is hold various discussions, hold talks. But besides that, one of the very key objective of the center is to make the teachings and the texts more accessible to the people here in local languages, which is Marathi and Gujarati. So you can read more about the center on the website, which we have, which is kfimumbai.org. So you can log in. So today's session is one out of many sessions, and it's a series of monthly talks. And the idea was to have a theme, have something central, and then talk of different topics every month. And the name of the series is called Discovering Life Afresh. And it was specially for students and young minds to absorb some of the thoughts and teachings of J. Krishnamurti. And the whole idea, I think the central question is something which we sent across in that one pager, which was, is there a way of living a life which is more richer in quality, which has the peace, the freedom, the creativity, along with a deep sense of purpose? So with that question in the center, today's talk, although the series is called Discovering Life Afresh, today's conversation and talk is about the topic of relationships and going deeper into that. And relationships was always a very key area which Krishnamurti used to focus on, J. Krishnamurti used to focus on and speak on and delve into. And today's session will be anchored by Father Lancy Prabhu, who I have the privilege of introducing. So the structure of today's talk is basically what we'll do is 45 minutes conversation, which Father can talk about relationships and delve into the subject. And then we can follow it after that in the remaining time with Q&A. And the Q&A will be anchored by Dr. Harshita, who we also have here with us. Let me just talk to you all about Father Lancy Prabhu. He is part of the Mumbai Executive Committee of the Krishnamurti Foundation India. And he's actually done his PhD in philosophy. And his thesis way back then was on J. Krishnamurti, very interestingly. And he's taught philosophy and comparative religions at St. Xavier's College in Mumbai for many years. Currently, he's the director of a retreat house, and he conducts programs on spirituality and also more on J. Krishnamurti's teachings. So with that, I would like to invite Father Lancy Prabhu now to delve into the topic for today, which is discovering relationships.
Thank you, Alok, for your kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here to share ideas and insights of J. Krishnamurti. In this session, we are going to explore an important question concerning our life, relationships. We are going to look at it afresh, with new eyes, as it were, as J. Krishnamurti himself invites us to do. Most central to life is relationship. Relationship is life. To be is to be related, says Krishnamurti. And he adds, relationship is to all things, including all the things in nature. No man is an island, says a well-known poet. We are not isolated atoms. We are social beings involved in a network of relationships to everyone and everything. And our relationship is society. We all seek relationships. Who doesn't want to be in contact, to be connected? How keen is our desire to have friends? Children in school, when they return home, talk about their friends, their best friend. And youngsters, when they come back from school,
Father, your voice has stopped.
So I began with asking, why do you come to college? Thinking that the students will say, to be educated. But they surprised me by saying, we come to college to make friends. I said, but you don't want to learn and study? Yeah, of course we want to study and learn, but we want to make friends. Young adults, no less than seniors, all wish to have meaningful relationship. Our relationship can be a source of great warmth, affection, joy, delight, and meaning. How happy, full of vitality, energy, and enthusiasm we all are when we meet someone who is close, particularly after a long spell. Imagine life without relationships, without friends. That's a life of isolation, far from being happy. Sadly, this is what many experienced during the last 2 years due to the pandemic. Our relationships are especially delightful and meaningful when they are genuine, when there is real meeting with others, without facades, without pretensions or masks. When we experience a direct connection, communion, and love. Real living, says Martin Buber, a well-known Jewish philosopher, is meeting. That's what Krishnamurti impresses upon people all the time. True living is meeting, communion, love. And it is in this we discover the art of living that transforms our life. Having said that, we have to also at the same time consider that tragically, relationships all over the world are filled with conflicts, filled with pain, misery, unhappiness. Even the most intimate relationships are problematic, disturbed by arguments, clashes, turmoil, emotional violence, and sometimes physical violence too. Communion and love seem so very infrequent. Relationships, even the intimate ones, says Krishnamurti, are like the lines of the railway, close, running parallel, but never meeting. Now, of course, people do experience joy, delight, communion in relationships, but such moments are rare and short-lived. Krishnamurti says relationships are in disorder. And this is reflected in the way of living of most people, and which produces the divisive, conflictual, violent, and destructive world in which we all live. Sadly, we get used to disorder in our relationship. We accept it, we put up with it, and are indifferent to it. Is this strange or unusual? It is very common. We find it everywhere. But it's absolutely insane, tragic, and sad. Krishnamurti says we don't actually perceive that to live in disorder is the greatest danger and how destructively it impacts our world. So the question, can there be order in our relationships? First of all, what does order mean? It means there are no conflicts, no friction in relationship. And in our relationships, whether with friends, companions, husband or wife, there is real meeting, real communion, love, not merely being physically together. And there is peace, harmony, warmth, affection, which overflows into our everyday life and affects the world around in powerful way. We all want this kind of relationship. But what can be done to make it happen? The most common approach, which is traditional and familiar to everyone, is to cultivate or practice love. An abstract ideal of what love is projected, and then we try to reach this projected ideal. This involves effort and discipline. It creates a division inside me between what I am, the fact that I am not loving, and what I should become, which is non-fact, that is loving. The effort and struggle to reach the ideal strengthens and expands the self, the me, which is the very barrier to relationship and love. Besides, with the help of effort and striving, I may make some progress, but there is always a sliding back. What is wrong with this familiar, traditional, common approach? It completely ignores the barriers or hindrances which are there inside me that block and come in the way of true relationship. These are left untouched, not dissolved. They weigh me down, and when I stretch myself towards the ideal of love, I am weighed down by all these barriers and obstacles. Imagine a boy. This is it's an ordinary comparison. Don't push it too far. Imagine a boy who is running a 100 meters race. And for some strange reason, he has filled all his pockets. Today we have clothes which are all pockets. So he has filled his pockets with stones. And then he's waiting on the starting line, ready to make a dash. As long as those stones are weighing him, will he soar really? Hardly. He has to remove all those stones, and then he will soar. Something like this. When we remove all the barriers and obstacles of non-love within us, then love naturally and spontaneously emerges. So Krishnamurti gives us a different approach. And this approach, he cautions us, don't simply know or understand it intellectually. Try it out. Test it for yourself. Experiment with it. Find out if it works for you. So first of all, he says, discard or set aside the common approach of ideals. We don't know what love is. We have words, ideas, concepts of what love is, but love as a fact, as a reality, is beyond any word, idea, concept. So Krishnamurti's concern really here is that we actually come upon love. We we, as it were, experience it, get a sense of it, a taste of it, not merely be satisfied with verbal descriptions or conceptual knowledge of it. So he sets aside all words and concepts about love. He says we must focus on what love is not, that is, on the barriers to love, which are a fact, not an abstraction, and a fact that we can actually observe, understand, and dissolve completely. Only then real meeting and relationships can emerge. What is absolutely important, therefore, is understanding deeply, having an insight into these barriers, perceiving the truth about them. This deep understanding or insight dissolves the barriers into nothingness, allowing relationships and love to emerge spontaneously. Thus, the way to real relationships is the way of negation. Setting aside through understanding and insight all the barriers, obstructions, impediments within us that come in the way of love. For this, what is absolutely necessary is ceaselessly observing with attention what is actually going on inside, how the barriers operate in my relationships. My relationship is a mirror which reveals what is happening inside me. It uncovers, exposes the barriers operating there. Ceaseless observation or awareness brings clear understanding of the love-blocking barriers that dissolves them. I don't have to do anything. I simply have to observe it. Observation itself is the action. In doing this, I don't think, reflect, or analyze the love-blocking barriers. I only alertly watch them functioning within me with complete attention, without judging, evaluating, and condemning. I just watch them as if they were happening in someone else. Watching with complete attention is really watching in silence, in which the I, the me, the center is absent. In Krishnamurti's words, it is observation without the observer. The observer or the I is absent. Observation or watching with complete attention brings insight, understanding that dissolves the barriers to love. So this is Krishnamurti's completely different approach. It is really an approach where I see relationships, indeed everything, afresh, with new eyes, as it were. It is a way of seeing that must be actually tried out and experimented with in our daily relationship with others. It is not merely meant to be understood intellectually. As Krishnamurti put it, test this not casually, but with all your heart and being. Discover for yourself the truth of the matter. So what are the actual barriers and hindrances that we need to observe, understand deeply, and dissolve for true relationships and love to naturally, spontaneously emerge? The chief among these, as Krishnamurti points out, are first images, attachments, psychological hurts and wounds, desire, pleasure, the pursuit of it, becoming somebody, that is being driven by ambition for power, for position, for success, for fame, for prestige and status. So these are the chief barriers. These barriers, observation will show, are processes or mechanisms that operate within us in relationships. All of them, in different ways, support and sustain the root barrier to love, the self, the me, the ego. We shall explore perhaps two of the main barriers. But before we begin to do that, I wish to give you a brief glimpse of human relationships, a snapshot, as it were, given by J. Krishnamurti. When we have real relationship, whether with a friend or companion, a colleague or husband and wife, we experience a sense of communion and love. That is real relationship. We actually meet. But unfortunately, although we may say we are related to others, unconsciously or in unawareness, we tend to allow psychological walls or enclosures to be built around ourselves. These are walls of non-love, barriers to love. It is no surprise, therefore, that our relationships tend to be disturbed by conflicts, clashes, friction, with little or no real relationship or communion. This seems to happen to people all over. Why does this happen? The fundamental reason is each one does not forget himself or herself in relationship and seems far too preoccupied with her or his own interests, concerns, pains, and pleasures. Krishnamurti gives a common example of the husband and wife. But what he says is applicable to any relationships. He says a husband tends to think mostly of himself, pursuing his own pleasure, desire, ambition, achievement, success, fulfillment. And the wife too does the same. She too focuses on meeting her own desires, interests, ambitions, and fulfillment. Actually, unconsciously or in unawareness, both tend to use each other to fulfill their needs, urges, desires, and interests. The same story is played out in different ways in most relationships, whether between friends, companions, colleagues, neighbors, or others. Each one, most often unconsciously or in unawareness, gets so absorbed with his or her own interests, pleasures, and desires desires. But there are moments, of course, when people simply forget themselves in their relationships. Yes, there are such moments. But these moments are rare. When people forget themselves in their relationships, are not self-absorbed, the walls of self-isolation don't get erected. But this is seldom the case with most. Perhaps with some people, this may happen more frequently, even in an abiding way. Why do walls of isolation get built around us? Krishnamurti's answer, because, I quote, in all our relationships and actions, we want to be safe, secure. That inevitably builds walls of self-enclosure. So this is a glimpse of human relationships that Krishnamurti gives. Now I come to a fundamental barrier in relationships, communion, and love. Krishnamurti puts it in the form of a question. Is there love when there are images? By images, Krishnamurti means the screen of, or a series of images through which we relate to one another. Generally, most of us look at people, things, including things in nature, through a lens of images. And we seem to be completely unaware of this. I used to ask students a question: do you see people and things as they are? Then I would tell them, do a simple experiment. Go and sit in the college cafeteria or on Marine Drive and just observe people for half an hour or more. Days later in class, I would ask them, did you simply look at people? Or did you also become conscious of something more entering into your looking? A continuous inner commentary, judging, evaluating, comparing, relating what you saw to some past experience or memory, liking, disliking, all these things coloring your seeing, so that you really did not see people as they are, but through a screen of your thinking, experiences, memories, knowledge, and feelings. Something similar happens when we see things. For instance, a tree in the garden. We don't see it objectively, but we see it through a screen of our subjective reactions, which are made up of our botanical knowledge, past experiences, memories, fantasies, likes and dislikes. But, and this is something which is important for us to know, it can also happen that sometimes when we are looking, our mind may all of a sudden become quiet. Thinking may stop for a moment, and our I or self may become silent. And then we perceive or sense the tree as it is, directly, with nothing intervening, and experience communion with it. Perhaps that may also happen sometimes when we look at someone. Thinking may subside of a sudden. We forget ourselves and see that person as he or she is, and experience communion. Generally, however, when we look at people and things, we don't see directly, but through a complex screen of what Krishnamurti calls images. When Krishnamurti uses the word images, it must be clear, he doesn't simply mean visual images, but a whole complex mixture of judgments, words, names, labels, ideas, concepts, conclusions, experiences, knowledge, including feelings, desires, motives. Where does all this stuff come from? It comes from our background, our programming or conditioning by culture, tradition, society, and our experiences. Relationship really exists often only between images, not persons. In the course of our everyday relationship with each other, over a period of time and many, many experiences, our mind creates a series of images. And we look at each other through this screen. Our relationship with each other, therefore, becomes a relationship between two images. How can there be real relationship, love, and affection, asks Krishnamurti, between two images? What makes it more complicated is that I have images about others, and I also have images about myself. And it is through the screen of these that I relate to others, and the others do the same. When we relate to another, that is through images, through us, we relate really through a screen of all our accumulated knowledge, memories, and experiences. And when we do that, we can never really know that person whom we relate to completely. We may think we know that person because we have lived with that person for many, many years, but we really don't. We only have memories, knowledge, conclusions about the person. No real knowing, contact, connection. That person, whether a wife or husband, a friend or companion or neighbor, is really an extraordinary mystery, living, dynamic, changing every moment. And we try to freeze the person into static images, labels, conclusions, like photos. We are unable to see the person as alive, as a fresh human being, each new day, as if for the first time. So the question, how and why do we form images? In our daily relationships with each other, we experience pleasure, praise, flattery, comfort, insults, hurts, pains, and we register all this in memory in the form of images. Why does this registration take place? It is because I am inattentive. I am unaware when I go through these experiences. If I were to be completely attentive when going through these experiences, there would be no registration of images in memory. But I not only allow images to be registered, but I also identify with them, hold on to them, and get attached to them. Why does that happen? Because having images and holding on to them gives me safety, security for myself or ego. To quote Krishnamurti, we have images about ourselves and images about others. Why is it that each one has a peculiar image and identifies himself with that image? Is the image necessary? Does it give one a sense of security? Does not the image bring about the separation of human beings? Images produce conflict. Through the series of images in memory that I've identified with and hold on to, I build a huge wall of separation or division between me and others. The result is conflict. True seeing is seeing people as they are directly, without images. That enables real contact, relationship, communion. If I am to experience this, I have to dissolve or demolish this big wall of images in which I enclose myself. What can be done towards that? Going a step further, what can be done to stop the very process of forming images? The entire machinery of image making, as Krishnamurti puts it, that can happen through ceaseless observation or watching of myself in relationship with others. When I give complete attention with everything in me, there is no observer, no I or self, only a state of attention, of silence, in which understanding of images and image making takes place, that dissolves images and ends image making. Actually, image making happens in the first place because we are inattentive in our relationship. When we look in silence with complete attention to a person or a flower or a tree, there is no center from which we look. Words, thinking, past knowledge, that is images, don't interfere, and there is relationship and communion. So this is about the most fundamental barrier to relationship and love, and that is images. We now explore another big barrier, and that is attachment. What is attachment? The word attach means to hold, to cling to. What I am attached to could be a person, a friend, a companion, husband, wife, or the attachment could be to things, possessions, places, looks, talents, ideas, theories, memories, beliefs, opinions, achievement, just about everything. Attachment brings pleasure, delight, comfort, a sense of belonging, satisfaction, fulfillment, safety, security. That's true of attachment. Attachment can have a biological basis, a blood connection, but it can be merely psychological, which is the case most of the time. How does attachment arise? It is a complex thing, but to make things simple, if we were to explore attachment in an objective way, without judgment, evaluation, and condemnation, we can get an understanding of how the attachment arises. First, there is contact with a person, a casual meeting on any occasion. This contact creates in me a sensation of pleasure. The person's company, looks, behavior, how he or she acts, talks, attracts, and gives pleasure and delight. If it is a thing, a bike or a beautiful car or an attractively advertised modern appliance, it causes a sensation of pleasure and delight. Then my mind, through thought or thinking, registers an image or picture of the pleasure associated with the person or thing in memory. Then desire arises over a period of time, especially with regard to a person, and I want to be in the company of the person and eventually hold or cling to him in order to repeat the pleasurable sensation that the person has caused me. The same thing applies to a thing. So this is a simple understanding of how attachment arises. Krishnamurti says something which is striking. He says, the attachment is really to dead things, to a picture or image of the person, and not to the living person. We are attached not to the living person, but to the idea, the memory of the pleasures and experiences we have had from that person. Significantly, he asks, excuse me for a while. Can you be attached to a river? You may have a memory of a particular river, but you cannot be attached to the waters. The river is moving swiftly. It is in constant state of movement. And what you are attached to is a picture which the word river awakens. Somewhere where you had pleasure, amusement, a quiet evening by the riverside. But you cannot be attached to the movement of that water. Similarly, he seems to suggest that is true of the human being too. When there is attachment to a person in relationship, it often becomes a mutual thing, a dependent relationship. I, in unawareness, feel I need that person or thing and cannot do without the person. So I cling or hold on to the person. I identify with the person. He or she is mine, belongs to me. His joy or her joys and pains and anxiety and fears become mine. If something happens to the person, I am affected. Stronger the attachment, greater the intensity of all this. Most people may ordinarily look at attachment in a positive light, because attachment brings a sense of aliveness, warmth, excitement, and especially companionship and belonging, a certain sense of fulfillment. But there is another side which is not so positive. A neediness or clinging quality often marks attachment. I become, as it were, addicted to the person, and the person acts like a drug. I'm on a high when the drug is available and down when it is not there or denied. When the person does not respond to my needs and wishes and expectation or looks somewhere else, ugliness enters the relationship. There are clashes, possessiveness, jealousy, anger, hurt, and fear of loss if the relation breaks up. Most of all in attachment, on account of the dependency, I lose my freedom. When attachment is mutual, there is an emotional exchange, a kind of cooperation to meet each other's needs and expectations. This, of course, is far from easy. But if there is a degree of awareness and sensitivity to each other, and especially a degree of self-forgetfulness, then it can work out well. Krishnamurti, in fact, says two people can have a relationship of love if they are intelligent, aware, sensitive. There is freedom and no sense of self or me, without the ugliness that can creep into relationship. He was asked a question about two people in love, and he replies, can't two people be in love and both be so intelligent and so sensitive that there is freedom and absence of a center that makes for conflict? Conflict is not the feeling of being in love. The feeling of being in love is utterly without conflict. There is no loss of energy in being in love. The loss of energy is in the tail, in everything that follows, jealousy, possessiveness, suspicion, doubt, the fear of losing that love, the constant demand for reassurance and security. Surely it must be possible to function in a sexual relationship with someone you love without the nightmare which usually follows. Of course it is, he insists. An emotionally dependent relationship, which is attachment, might bring comfort and satisfaction for a while. But inevitably, there is pain and suffering. Because I'm dependent on the person, I keep going up and down at the whim and fancy of the other. I am no longer free. And then there are constant clashes and conflicts and jealousy and possessiveness, hurt, anxiety, fear, anger, hatred, and even grief and loneliness when there is a breakup. All these are the necessary consequences of attachment. If we investigate and observe the process of attachment more deeply, we will discover lurking beneath attachment, loneliness, emptiness, incompleteness, insufficiency. This is the very nature of the self or me. I may unconsciously try to escape from this loneliness and emptiness by seeking fulfillment with people, with things, possessions, achievements, etc. But it never lasts. The sense of loneliness and neediness and incompleteness gets covered up for a while, only to surface again in other ways. Only in facing the fact of attachment with complete attention, not avoiding it or being distracted from it, can there be insight, understanding that ends or dissolves attachment, this big barrier to love. Finally, a word about detachment. Sometimes a person, he has had a very bad experience in his attachments. He's gone through conflict and pain and hurts and suffering. And so he wants to be detached, cut off from all attachment. Detachment is an opposite ideal, merely an idea, a non-fact, an illusion. Trying to reach it through your willpower and effort, which is becoming, not only reinforces the I or ego, but what is worse, it destroys the person's humanity, makes the person cold, hard, bitter, without affection, aloof, isolated. So, once again, the only way we can overcome this barrier is by trying to understand it, get an insight into it. And understanding can come when we watch the process of attachment ceaselessly, with attention, without judging, condemning, evaluating it. When we are able to observe with attention, in that observation, attachment may dissolve. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Prabhu, for such insightful words and enlightening us with regards to J. Krishnamurti's principles and teachings. So we now start with the question and answer session. So I kindly request all the participants to be very brief and specific in their questioning so that everyone gets a fair chance. Also, I would also request that any question that needs any kind of an elaborate explanation or discussion, we can surely pursue it on email later on. So now I invite the participants to kindly come forward and ask their questions to Father Lancy Prabhu. So any questions?
I have one question that I wanted to ask. Hello, Father Lancy Prabhu. It was a very interesting session that you put forth today, and the topic of Krishnamurti. I myself have been studying Krishnamurti for years. I have a master's in philosophy, and Krishnamurti was one paper which I studied for a semester. Okay, so this is what my question is. In terms of relationships, now that we live in the 21st century where technology is dominating our everyday aspects of our life, so how do we build authentic, real, genuine connections where technology is prevalent?
First of all, technology cannot be a substitute for face-to-face meetings. It is because we are not able, in the present circumstances of the COVID pandemic, that we have chiefly resorted to online communication. Online communication or communication via phone is all right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But if all the communication I do with someone is only restricted to that, then I would think that we are missing something very precious. And that's the actual direct contact with someone. So that would be my response. I mean, sometimes I may actually have a very meaningful contact and relationship with someone, and it happens that I am not able to meet such a person. In such circumstances, of course, keeping contact via phone or internet is quite okay. That would be my response.
So any other question from anyone?
I'd like to ask a question. Father, if J. Krishnamurti is of the opinion that every relationship has this element of attachment, but when in the word we use relation, there has to be an attachment, no? Some kind of attachment. How can there be non-attachment and there can be a relationship? So has he pointed out something on this? Because every religion, like everywhere, we see that attachment in the form of rag and dvesh. In all the Indian philosophies are always there, which hampers. So then, how we have to visualize this kind of relationship, where there is truth and everything, but without attachment, can we sustain that? It will be like I'm meeting you and then, okay, fine, but then in our life, we may not meet again, but like close family members, close friends, there is an element of attachment. So how he will be defining this?
According to Krishnamurti, there can be a relationship in which there is no attachment, in the sense I am not clinging or holding on to someone, and yet I have an immense sense of love, affection, care, concern for the other. That I'm coming from a deeper place. I'm coming from my deepest nature. Whereas attachment understood in the sense of, so it doesn't cancel love, warmth, affection, but it brings order into all this.
Okay.
What is the case is, in our attachment, there is always this order. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he says it is possible not to have that ugliness in our relationships.
Right. So it can be the principle of cosmic order Rutta. Everything in the cosmos is very cordial. It is related to each other.
Very true. So when he speaks of order, he probably suggests this, that when there is order, all this ugliness is not there. But that is part of our deepest nature, to love.
Yes.
Without seeking anything.
Right. And do you think that he is deriving few concepts from the Vedas, or it is completely that he is also without any bias when he is formulating a theory? Because many a times he talks about awareness, and this awareness is choiceless, and we are always biased by any awareness. So do you think his philosophy, I'm asking little general question, but I don't know whether I'm allowed, but that is what I was thinking, that don't you think it has this roots of Vedic philosophy in it, or you have some other opinion?
He himself would not agree that there are all these influences, because he has come to this through his own investigation, through his own observation, through his own awareness. Now, he has come to these insights. Now, some of these insights, perhaps many more than we can imagine, they correspond to insights which you may find in other traditions. That can happen.
Yeah.
But he himself has come to it, on his own, independently of all these influences. That's what he says repeatedly. Yeah.
So it is his personal experiences, what we call knowledge.
Right.
Because otherwise it will become like information.
Yes. In fact, he is very critical of, he says, discard all that knowledge.
Yes.
Because that knowledge itself will be an obstacle for you to understand yourself and, be aware of yourself.
Yeah. But whether he has defined knowledge as how we defined in Indian tradition as gyan, or it will be the experience, anubhava.
Yeah.
Because then there is this problem, no? If we say I have.
Correct. He kind of, he says, discard what we call gathered knowledge, conceptual knowledge, because that's coming from conditioning,
Right.
But there is a knowledge which is beyond this, but it's a way of knowing or experiencing or perceiving, which is beyond this, beyond thought, he would say, beyond the conditioned mind.
Yes.
Even beyond the mind, he would say. Mind understood as conditioned mind.
Conditioned mind. Yes. Thank you very much, Father, for clarifying. Thank you very much. It is a really pleasure hearing to you after a long time.
Yeah, thank you very much too.
Any other questions that anybody would like to ask?
I think it would be nice if people can put the videos on, because then there would be more interaction, I think.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, I would ask, does Krishnamurti ever give some insights on self-love? Because mostly whenever we do find ourselves in relationships, it's more important that we foster our relationship with our own self before feeling connected or entering into a new one. So does he ever share some ideas on self-love?
he doesn't explicitly speak of self-love at all. But what he advocates, even in this, in his approach of awareness, in his approach of observing everything, there is no judgment, evaluation, condemnation. Because ordinarily, most of us are there. We are all the time not only judging, condemning, evaluating others, we do the same thing to our own self. That is the very activity of thought, he would say. It's the very nature of thought, along with the me or the I. That is the conditioned self. That is to judge. But when there is no thought, no self, there is no condemnation. There is no condemnation, no evaluation. So therefore, there is no need of, having an explicit self-love, because you have a non-condemnatory, non-judgmental, compassionate, sensitive attitude towards everyone and everything. That would be.
So what was this self-love that you were talking about, Siddhant? I haven't really understood.
Ma'am, see, usually, I guess the thing is that not a lot of people have read Krishnamurti, because like I personally come from a philosophy background, and I was grateful that I got a chance to study a paper on Krishnamurti for an entire semester. And majorly you see all these productivity experts or these self-help gurus, they talk about self-love. Eventually they are all giving us an ideal, and Krishnamurti himself was against this ideal thing, because all he wanted was like, you'll have to kind of explore it for yourself, and you have to give total attention to everything that you perceive. And so it was pretty, I would say, like, I just wanted to know how self-love would fit in, because his own definitions of love are pretty complicated, and there have been a lot of times where I have disagreed with his own ideas. So I thought, like, will there be a perspective that he will ever talk about self-love? Because like, if he would not say that you have to have your own constructed ideal, because if you have your own ideal, then you will never get to live the actual thing that you're supposed to do, because then you will uh, uh, dive deep only into speculation, and you will miss out a chance on interacting with the nature around you. So that is what I felt.
I think somewhere Krishna ji has said that where there is love, self is not there, right? So aren't the two, in a sense, mutually exclusive? Because there is no construct left for the ego to. Because I think that love is, Father, isn't it that the love is universal and
Yes,
not.
definitely so. See, what happens, as long as we operate, which is generally the case most of the time, operate at the level of our ordinary consciousness, which is a thought consciousness, very much conditioned, we always have a problem of self-acceptance. We don't accept ourselves as we are. We have a whole lot of things. We have a bad self-image and things like that. But all that is at the level of thought, thinking. But Krishnamurti is telling us, if you go beyond that level, to a level of awareness, just being with what is. You have discarded all that. There is no real need for that, because then there is love, and it is, all inclusive. So you don't have to be bothered with the other thing, because the other thing, as you know, there are these programs to improve the self-image of people, to make them accept themselves more and more, and they have to repeat certain slogans, but those things will always be questioned. They will have doubts about those things. But when you are in a state of being aware, which is accepting things as they are, what is, nothing is a problem.
Father, just one, maybe I'll also add something as a question. You spoke about awareness, and in a state of, natural awareness, in that state, it is possible, or it is possible that, images are not built. But what about, all of us, where we've had so many years of so many relationships, so many people we know, and it's all added up, it's compounded, and there's a lot of attachment, there are a lot of everything is like a matrix to us, and it's all there, in our mind right now. So it's the load which you were talking about that we are carrying over so many years. Now, how does one approach those, relations? Because they are the things we see around us, a deep, relationship, the people we are closest to. How would you sort of approach it, and use that to build something which becomes pure over time? What would you sort of say to this?
I think the first step is in at least being aware that these images are there. Most of the time, see, I had asked the students to go and look at other people. Most of the time, they cannot differentiate between the person and what they are projecting onto that person, their thoughts, their feelings, their attitudes. Now, in course of time, if there is a degree of awareness and observation, we are able to differentiate between the two. And we can hold all those, thoughts and images. We can hold them lightly, not get attached to them. Of course, when someone comes, and all these images, will suddenly surface. Whereas before, these images were surfacing, and I was reacting in terms of those images. Now, when I become conscious, I realize that they are images, and perhaps I'm holding down those onto them. I need not allow them to influence my interaction. That's possible. For instance, you go to a meeting and you see people there, repeatedly, manifesting the same old behavior. And then you go there and you are very alert. Whereas earlier you may have been unconsciously hooked and got into some kind of interchange. You now are much more alert. And so that is possible. I could meet someone, whom I dislike, but I can hold that lightly and not allow that to influence my interaction. I think that's the beginning.
Right.
That's the beginning.
Interesting. Right.
So, Father, I had one question. As having a normal understanding of human relationships, we seek human relationships for psychological security. And in that sense, can you throw light upon what J. Krishnamurti would have spoken about relationships and psychological security? And in that sense?
Yeah. See, J. Krishnamurti has got a very radical view on this. When he talks about psychological security, it is security for the me, the self, the ego. And he says there is no real psychological security at all. You may experience an absolute sense of security, but that can happen when the I or the me has gone into abeyance. Because that is the root of all insecurity. So then you are absolutely secure. So coming to love, or love means in daily life, love may mean simple things. An immense sense of caring, concern, kindness, considerateness, thoughtfulness to someone else, where I'm not seeking anything for myself. Now, this is part of my deepest nature. So therefore, I don't need, I don't crave for love. The craving is there in an earlier state, where I must be loved. But once that is transcended, then I am, I pour out myself in love, to the world. But I'm not begging the world to, for love. I have gone beyond that. I have transcended that. So that is the sense that he would convey, as I understand.
Thank you. Thank you. So there is one student called Anushri. So Anushri, in the chat box, she has written that we as teenagers at this stage, we are still shaping our personalities and we are trying to find balance between relationships. So which is why she's saying that I don't have any question, but we just as teenagers are trying to shape our personalities. So could you throw some light on that?
I think, children and of course teenagers are not too far ahead of them. Krishnamurti would say it is very important that the children flower in all their capacities, abilities, whether of body, of mind, and the whole of them. Now what happens is, so flower in all that sort of thing, which means flowering in love and all those things, without becoming self-centered. That is the biggest challenge, biggest challenge. Unfortunately, we live in a society where right from early years through our education in school and college, while certain unfolding of all our gifts and talents and things like that takes place, but along with that there is this creeping growth of the self that also takes place. So now I think when they are young, they need to unfold all their capacities and talents and gifts. I think their focus should be much more on that, because they still have to, and there is so much in in every single person. In fact, it is said that we develop only a fraction of all what we have inside, the potential. So that needs to develop. But how can all that develop without a person becoming self-centered, isolating himself or herself? That's the real challenge.
Just following up on that, actually, it's a very interesting thing. Do you, Father, would you say, and that, even Anushri was saying, that as a teenager or somebody who's younger, do you think they can receive or understand these, the teachings and what Krishnamurti is trying to say, and absorb these a little more easily compared to people who have, sort of already grown their self over many years? So would it, and is it the reason why J. Krishnamurti was also more focused on education of and on students and so on? Do you think that they have more the capacity to absorb much more at that time and receive these teachings?
Correct. In general, all young people tend to be much more open and receptive, and they are willing to take risks. So that is the quality of young people. Much older people, they have got so many experiences. They are burdened by all the past, so then they tend not to be so open. But young people are open. But the young people, as they grow up, they may end up like that. And Krishnamurti is at pains to tell the youngsters, don't end up like that. So therefore, the young people, I mean, as far as conveying what Krishnamurti conveys, young people can certainly be, receive what Krishnamurti is saying concerning how they can live their lives happily, how they can discover what they are deeply interested in and what they love and devote themselves to it, rather than going in what we would call for a career which only brings them more and more what we would call extrinsic rewards, while they would end up doing something which they hate. So this is a thing that Krishnamurti said, because when you discover what you love and are able to devote yourself to it, you are happy.
Right.
So Krishnamurti is very much concerned about the quality of life, quality of relationships. It certainly applies to them. Applies to everybody, of course. Yeah.
Any other questions anybody would like to ask?
I think there are no more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So should I then conclude, Anjali Tai, or should we?
Yeah, I think, since nobody has questions.
And any questions, y'all can even sort of write to us. Is there an email ID, Anjali Tai, which we can?
Yeah, the same email ID on which we have sent.
Yeah, the same email ID. I think y'all can, be in touch with us. So I'll just want to thank Father Lancy Prabhu for that insightful talk. I think everybody got an essence, and I think it was very practically sort of shared. I think real insights and interesting sort of things which he's even mentioned to students, like go out on Marine Drive, just look around. Very interesting sort of practical suggestions also. So thanks, Father, for that wonderful session, and very nice to have this young audience also, and quite a few participants. We should be in continued touch. The other thing which we would want to mention is this was one of the sessions of a series of sessions. So I think there are sessions around identity and limits of thought, and exploring the ending of time. So very different perspectives, and going into the same sort of thought of discovering life afresh. And we'll have different strings of this, which we'll sort of delve into every month. Anjali Tai, you want to talk anything more on on this series, and anything else which I have missed out?
No, we'll inform everyone about the upcoming event, and hope everybody does register and attend these things and explore life really.
So the idea is that over time, with each session, I mean, every time you get, more, you delve more into it, you really understand it and experience it. So we would recommend that, we do it every month. It sort of helps at the end of that, the series of talk. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we will all be in touch. Thanks, Anjali Tai, for organizing this, and thanks,
Thanks,
for the Q&A.
Father. Thank you a lot.
Thank
you very much. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Bye,
So
everyone.
I close
Take
the
care.
session. Thank you.
Bye. See you all.